So welcome tonight to a very special evening. I'm Nannette Maciejunes, the director and CEO of the museum, and I have remarks, and I'm really, people are so lovely. They write me remarks, and then I go off script. My job really is to stand here and welcome you and then introduce Congresswoman Beatty. But I wanted to tell you that I have never known the Columbus Museum of Art without Aminah Robinson. She was here before I came. Aminah knew the Columbus Museum of Art since the time she was 16 or 17. I think she told me she was 16 when she walked through our doors. She told me the story of being in a high school art competition and all of that art being shown at the museum, and one was her piece, which was her first piece to ever hang on our walls. I never imagined that I would still be director after she left us. Her leaving us was, I think we all believe she left us too soon. But the amount of work that she did while she was here is just phenomenal. And she had faith in the museum that we would do better every day. And she it's left a legacy for all of us, but I'm trying to struggle with the word is that she told me that she was going to leave her estate to the museum because she trusted us. And that trust is it's a glorious burden that the museum must do the right thing to make sure that her legacy and her art is shared with generations, not of just people in Columbus, Ohio, but of people across this country and across the globe. So she believed that we would do that. She believed in that. And her last Chihuahua baby, we needed to find a home for, and there were many good homes that were possible. We ended up, baby spent his last years with an artist who wrote the most beautiful obituary I've ever seen for a dog. And her ended by saying, I don't know really what happens, but in my heart I believe that Aminah's at the gate waiting for baby. So this is very meaningful. So one of the things that we're doing as I close out, I think many of you may know I'm leaving the museum at the end of this year. Actually, end of the first week of January, I'm retiring. I'm an old guy, so I'm gonna be 69. So I think it's time for some fresh ideas. I've been director 20 years. But one of the things that so there's two ways of retiring. My colleagues tell me there's the glide path. They're like, I said, what's that? There's like every day you make fewer decisions, and by the end you're just sitting there. And I said, okay. And they said, is that what you're doing? I said, well, nah. They said, oh, you're a cliff person. Then I said, what's that? They said, you make a million decisions, you try to do as much as you can, and then on Wednesday, nobody cares that you were even here. I said, yeah, I'm that person. And one of the things that I'm wanting to launch before, with the help of so many good friends of this community, is the Aminah Robinson Legacy Endowment. It is very important, that work. I want to secure that work. Somebody says, well, what does the endowment pay for? All things Aminah. That's very simple, all things Aminah. But most importantly is that, helped by the Columbus Foundation, we were able to, Aminah left us her home and studio. And we have renovated it with help from the Columbus Foundation, and we have launched a fabulous national fellowship program with GCAC. GCAC also helps us with local Aminah Robinson Fellows. I thank you, Tom Katzenmeier is in the room. This is an incredibly important work, and this year we launched a writer's residency because Aminah was a brilliant writer as well as visual artist. Writing was integral to who she was. So this is why we're here, and I have something great to tell you. Collectively, all of us, we have two hosts this evening. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, who has been a long-term friend of not only this museum, but our entire community, and Donna and Larry James. See, I know I screwed that. I got Congresswoman, but Donna and Larry. And if you have not seen, Donna and Larry have pledged their collection to us. Another great honor for me because they wanted to do it while I was still here. So go down and see the Forward Together exhibition, which is down in the ground floor of the Walter Wing. So they are our hosts this evening, and collectively with all of you, we have raised the first $100,000 toward the endowment. So but we have a long way to go. I want this endowment to be $1 million. It's going to take us some time, but we are going to work on it every day. And it's important. It's important to this community, and it's important to the legacy of an artist that everyone should know. All right, so now I'm going to introduce Joyce. Now, Joyce, there's like 3 pages here on you. But I'm going to let you come up here and do 3 pages on Avis. I'm not going to do that. So this is our Congresswoman. And she fights for us every day, not just for the arts, but for voting rights reform, police brutality to address that, financial inequality, diversity, inclusion, healthcare, gun violence prevention, you name it. She is there on the front lines working for all of us, and I'm very proud for her to be my Congresswoman. And I brought something to hold up, Joyce. Here we go. So in 2013, we got the National Medal for the Arts in the National Medal. And we were only the 6th art museum to ever get it. It's given by the Institute for Museum and Library Services. What is it in the services? Science, no, service. So, but mostly they give it to libraries and zoos, which are all wonderful institutions, but art museums get really, we get involved in the objects. And this is an award about community service. It's about serving your community. And I'm so proud that we won it in 2013. And the day we won it, they send you this big banner. And I was going to step. So I have this in my office. Every day I look at this banner because Joyce, of course, came right over. Congresswoman Beatty said, no, I got to be there. And we have this great photograph of all of us on that day. And you were the one that called to tell me it happened. You said, it's coming, it's coming. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nannette. It is always an honor to be at home and to be with you at your house, as I like to call it, the Columbus Museum of Arts. To Donna and Larry James, partnering with you is an honor. And what amazing work you have done. And I know most of you know, and if you don't, they are very modest about their delivery, about their collection, and most importantly, about their giving. So tonight, I say thank you so much for again giving us another collection, Forward Together. And tonight, if you stroll through, what an amazing thing to see. Forward Together in black hands moving color. Avis Robinson. It is more than an honor to introduce to some and reintroduce to others an American journalist, Eugene Robinson, and his wife, an American artist, Avis Robinson, for tonight's chat. So sit back and get ready. But I get the honor of sharing what I know about them. Now, in a traditional environment, the introduction would go something like this. Eugene Robinson, a Michigan graduate, a mid-career Nieman Fellow at Harvard University. He started at San Francisco Chronicle with the assignment covering, some of you, like me, are old enough to know, the trial of Patty Hearst. Worked his way up through the ranks with far too many things for me to read or share. I might name drop a little bit. South Africa, correspondence based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, London bureau chief, foreign editor, assistant managing editor of Style Selection, opinion page column of politics and culture. Did I tell you Washington Post? too many honors and awards to list. But if I were going to name drop, I would say in 2009, the Pulitzer Prize for commentary, or I might say in 2021, honoree of the Larry Forster Award for integrity in public communications. Now, if that wasn't enough, just as one of my friends said, you had dinner with the Eugene Robinson? You mean you were on a Zoom? I said, no, live and in person. I even can tell you what he had on his plate for dinner. She said, you mean the one that was on Frontline talking about Putin's road to war? I said, yes, Putin's invasion of Russia. That Eugene Robinson. Now then I said, but let me tell you about Avis Collins Robinson. In the traditional introduction, you would say an economic and urban studies major at the University of Maryland, master degrees, Golden Gate University and Harvard. Avis is known for paintings and quilts that explore American history. She is an artist, she is a historian, and she is a scholar. And so tonight, all of those pieces, planks in their platform, will come alive on this stage. So tonight's dialogue will clearly show how their individual pieces came together to form a perfect picture of a colorful puzzle made up of an iconic journalist, orator, who captures audiences through his words in print on paper and his writings and his face unparalleled on our TVs. Weaved in creative captivity, an artist's platforms, Avis, pen to paper, fabrics of finest cloths that you touch and feel, oils and pencils and brilliant colors. So out from darkness, hands of colors, raw politics, liberal and foreign affairs, from Morning Joe to Politics Nations with Al Sharpton, Public TV, Rachel Maddow, Meet the Press. And tonight, on stage live, their power, their voices. I present to you Eugene Robinson, American journalist, Avis Collins Robinson, artist, historian, and tonight she's with her boo, Avis and Eugene. Let's give them a rousing applause.
Hey, everybody. Well, gee, hard to live up to that. Let me, Avis, we agreed I would kick this off, but for a second. But I have to first say thank you to Congresswoman Beatty, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. So I'm sorry. But, you know, I was telling my sister, no, I had dinner with the Joyce Beatty. So, and I have to thank Larry and Donna James for their generosity, their graciousness, and I have to thank Nannette and all the folks here at the Columbus Museum of Art who could not have been more generous and wonderful hosts. We kind of felt at home the moment we stepped across the threshold. And a special thanks, of course, to Deidre Hamler, the force of nature. The force of nature who made all this possible in record time, like in art museum terms, in the blink of an eye. It is amazing. It's that sort of, you know, women who are forces of nature, that's a theme tonight. and we're seeing a lot of that, and this is one of them. I am happy, could not be more happy to be here in Columbus, even though I went to a certain school up north. I promise not to say "Go Blue" tonight. Those words will not pass my lips, and I won't hold the whole Ohio State thing against anybody. As a matter of fact, I have great feelings about Columbus because when I was the editor of the Post-Style section, I managed to hire one of the most talented writers that Columbus ever produced, Will Haygood, for the Washington Post. We had wanted him. We had tried to get Will for years, and I nabbed him. So,
should I interrupt you like we do at home?
This is. I may be her boo, she's my babe. So.
You know, us women's livers, we have to just at least interject to thank. That my feelings of appreciation and thanks to all of you all for having me here, and just all the outpouring and warm feelings that I've gotten from the people who have visited the exhibition. But most importantly, I just want to slip in Aminah's name, who I had never had the opportunity to meet, but was taken to see her Raganons and was taken into the bowels of the museum this morning. And it is moving, and you feel her spirit, and her spirit for community. So she's not here, but she is here with us in spirit. And so really the reason why we are here, and the reason that, you know, I got that call from Deirdre was to help the community and to do something selfless, and to just to lift you all up. I'm overwhelmed by the community spirit and your love for each other and support for the community. And $100,000 is a lot of money to raise in a notion. So I have to slip in Aminah slip in that just to say how much we appreciate you for coming and for you being here.
That's absolutely right. Thanks to all of you. So before we get to really talk, because we're going to talk in depth about art, and we're going to start with that picture, but for just 5 minutes, since I have an audience, I got to preach, okay? I got to preach just a little bit. And I just want to preach just a little bit about what I think is, it's an interesting thing came out. Earlier this week, there was a poll that NBC News did, and they asked people to say, you know, what's your biggest issue? What's your main concern? You know, we got the midterm election coming up. What's the big deal? And to the surprise of the pollsters, who went back and checked their numbers several times, the number one thing that came up with was threats to democracy. It came up a bit more than inflation, a bit more than climate change, you know, all the things that we worry about and rightly worry about. Number one was threats to democracy. And, you know, I realize that means different things to different people. But I just want to talk for just 5 minutes about what that means to me, because I have strong feelings about what the gravest threat is to our democracy. And some may be surprised. It's not a person. It's not a party. It's a tool, and that tool is disinformation. And it is. I think this is the major challenge facing this country as we try to move forward as a country. You know, those of us who were of a certain age remember when there were 3 TV networks. You know, you could watch, you know, Walter Cronkite, or you could watch Huntley and Brinkley, or you could watch Frank Reynolds. I mean, that was kind of it on ABC. And you got your local newspaper, and maybe there was a regional newspaper or a national newspaper, but there weren't that many sources of news, and they were all operated by professional journalists who operated by a code, really, and a set of standards. We wanted to make sure everything we said was true. I was taught when I went into journalism, the worst thing in the world you could do was tell the reader something that wasn't true. And heaven help you if you made a mistake. So you checked everything. You know, the old saying, if your mother says she loves you, check it out, okay? You check out everything, you know. Ms. Robinson, are you sure you love him? Yeah. And so, but it's not like that anymore. That's not how people get their news. You know, the traditional newspaper model, advertising model, business model, you know, broke down. The internet, in the internet age, there's this multiplicity of news sources. And guess what? You know, you can click onto InfoWars just as easily as you can click onto the Washington Post. In addition to that, large numbers of Americans get their news sort of sideways through Facebook, from their friends. And what's so disturbing is the studies that have shown that false information, that made up information, goes viral much more easily and much more quickly than the truth, because fake stuff is exciting and crazy, and you want to tell your friends, did you hear this? This is crazy. So the latest thing is this bit about how the legislation that Congresswoman Beatty and the others passed the other day, and it was signed into law by President Biden on climate change and healthcare and everything, that it's funding 87,000 new armed IRS agents who are going to come to your small business and take your money at gunpoint. Now, this is a laugh, and I laughed the first time I heard it. I didn't laugh the 50th time somebody on my Twitter feed or on my email or whatever told me that in all seriousness, because that is a story that is out there. It is in no way true. It is not true. You know, 87,000 positions are not agent positions, but like 6,500 are agent positions. The rest are clerical workers, and most of it, this is over 10 years, and they're just trying to make up people who have been lost through attrition, because IRS hasn't had enough money to fill the jobs that, you know, and that's mainly what they're doing. And 1% of the agents will be armed, and they use those to go after, you know, the drug cartels and organized crime and people who are dangerous. But it's nothing like the truth. But that's got like nuance and detail, and it takes more than, you know, it takes a couple minutes to explain. And there are a lot of people who prefer to believe that first version, 87,000 armed IRS agents who are coming to take the money of small business people. And so that becomes, it's not truth, but to some people it is truth. There are people who actually believe it. And you know, the technology of obfuscation and lying has advanced much more quickly than the technology of truth-telling. And this is serious. We have it, you know, in a democracy, we're not supposed to agree. We're supposed to disagree. We're supposed to argue. We're supposed to have to, you know, our system is set up so you have to compromise, or you should be able to. But if we can't agree, like what happened yesterday, if we can't agree on basic provable facts, then how can we have any sort of reasonable discussion or argument or fight about those facts? Because people are living in different realities. And so, you know, I think there's some people, a few folks here, I hope from the Ohio State School of Communications. I hope you get a lot of funding, but you know, use some of it to study this problem, to help us figure this out. Because my fear is that our traditional way of dealing with this is just go out and tell the truth, and keep telling the truth, and keep telling the truth. Well, that's what we can do, and that's what we have to do. But I don't think that's enough. because I don't think that's working. And I think we need to understand at a deeper level what this information is and how it works, and then maybe we can come up with some techniques that we can test out and try to move forward this process of getting rid of disinformation and getting back to the point where we can at least agree on what happened and then have a productive discussion about what to do about it. So now, end of preaching. Let the church say amen. And now, now I want to turn to that image. That's a painting that hangs in my study at home in Arlington, Virginia. And if you've seen me on television during the pandemic, you've seen a piece of that painting in the background. And I hear from a lot of people who's like, who is that by? And I'm like, oh, Avis, you know, yes. This is a painting that Avis did. And so, and it's an example of, you know, when I look at most of your work, a lot of your work is portraits, but you also do this abstract work in fabric. I want to talk about the portraits, the painted portraits for a while. If you look at this painting, it's a painting of a group of men, but it is actually 14 portraits. 14, is it? Yeah, 15 portraits. And with all the faces, tell something about the man. And so I want you to just talk about this painting for a while and use that as a way to talk about how you see your portraiture.
Okay. All right. This came, Eugene and I have been together for 45 years, and his mother, it was a librarian, was at Claflin State University, and she said, I have a portrait of Eugene's uncle, Alonzo, great uncle Alonzo, and here's a certificate that shows he was the instructor of Masons at Claflin at South Carolina State. And then after she showed me the certificate, she said, here's a picture of Alonzo. And I said, okay, no one's ever going to remember Alonzo and the black men that built Claflin University. No one is going to ever pick up an old picture that's falling to pieces and crumbling to pieces. And once it's gone, no one will remember these extraordinary, ordinary people who built our nation, not just Claflin, but our countries. And so what I wanted to do was to create a large 20-foot by 10-foot painting of 15 real black men. Real people. These are not like I'm coming out of some, this is an idea. These are real people. And Alonzo is in the top row, fourth in the blue pants, and he is the instructor, and he is Eugene's great uncle. And that wheelbarrow is still in the back of Eugene's great-grandfather's house. But what I wanted to do, I have a thing about how African American men are represented in art, how they are artisans, how they are not just, it's just that we don't have these incredibly powerful images of black artisans. And so that's the genesis of this painting. And the bricks, just taking the time to just do every brick. If they took the time to put it together to make those bricks, then I had time to make those bricks and to paint the bricks properly. So that's really what it's about, is black men building a historical black college and how proud I was of them. and how proud they are. And that's what it's all about. It's about black men.
So let me, please. Go a little bit deeper on the question of portraiture, though, because downstairs in your exhibition, Black Hands Moving Colors, you have some really striking portraits. One of them is of the late Congressman John Lewis, one of my heroes, one of your heroes, Congresswoman Beatty, one of our heroes, and one of the nation's greatest heroes, in my opinion. But there's something about that picture. You really capture him coming out of the darkness. You painted it after his death. You knew him. So talk a bit about that picture and how in your portraiture you so manage, in my humble opinion, but I think in the opinion of many who see your portraits, you manage to get inside people. You get to heart and soul.
Well, when I do portraiture, and I know it's sort of weird that I have a finance background and an art background, but that's the way I am. As a child, I would sit in my room and I would just try to figure out the structure of a face, the skeletal structure. My mother was a biochemist and so was my father. So it's like I gotta get into the science of the face. But then you have to get into the soul of a person. And to me, the soul of a person is in their eyes. And in John Lewis, you can't really see his eyes, but you know, John Lewis, when you looked at him, it was like you knew. I mean, he just drew you in. So when I do a portrait, whether it's Jimi Hendrix or anybody, it's am I getting to the core of that person? And if it's not good, if it doesn't bring tears to my eyes when I'm painting it, then it's not a good painting. And it ain't coming out of my studio. It's just not happening. And you know, when John Lewis died, I just went down in the studio and I said, okay, I'm gonna get in some good trouble, and I'm gonna try to make sure that someone remembered him. We know who he is now, but will someone remember who he is 10, 100 years from now? You know, I want to make sure that that's not probably not. I want to make sure that people remember John Lewis. And coming out of the darkness he was just not afraid. And so that's what John Lewis is. Jimi Hendrix is another person. He's a black man who, in my age, he was a hero, but he was a tragic figure. And so I painted him from the eyes of his mother, a 28-year-old in London, you know, who could play the guitar like nobody's business. But he was in over his head, a black man. Nobody double-checking on how he's doing. And now he's dead. So you have all of the glitter, and you have the fancy jacket. But when you look in his eyes, you can see the pain and being overwhelmed, and just, he's lost.
He seems lost.
He's lost.
Mm-hmm. He does.
I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
All right. So I cried. I mean, yeah, he's a rock star, but he's a tragedy. He's a black tragedy, like so many of our black men. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it is.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I know just from having lived with you for 44 years, that you think long and hard in a very sophisticated way about colors, about your palette, about how the technical aspects of how you approach a given painting. Um, um, but you also you conveyed that tragedy in the Hendrix picture, that heroism in John Lewis, and in a funny way, there's also a painting downstairs of, and it's called Aunt Doc Fell Asleep, you know, on the porch going to church, right? And it's actually my from a photograph of my great aunt, whose name was Florella Fordham, who was, and she's on the porch of our house in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and yeah, she fell asleep. You know, it was time to go to church, and everybody else was slow, and so she went out to the porch, and she sat there, and she, you know, and Doc, you know, when it was time to doze off, you know, she was just going to doze off because nobody else was ready. She was the first registered nurse in our town, and white or black, and she was born in 1880. And one thing that I think of when I remember her is this: she was an incredibly confident woman, and that actually comes through in that painting that she's asleep. She's like, I don't care, I'm going to sleep. Y'all do whatever y'all doing, you know. So, you know, and I don't think you ever met Aunt Doc, but she had passed by the time you came into the family. But you captured her as well. I want to talk a bit about the work that you do in fabric as well, because I think it is absolutely remarkable, the fabric you use, the compositions you put together. I had more than one person today ask, how in the world do you make that lie flat with those? So just talk a little bit about your fabric work.
Okay. This is all, we could keep going back to the family, but my great-grandmother, Annie Chambliss, Chambliss families came here to see the work, but she made tuxedos in Baltimore. And in the evening, she would make haute couture clothes for women because we couldn't go into stores. And as a child, we would go to the fabric store and we would go out and find fabric, and we would feel the fabric, and we would say, okay, this is how wool feels, this is how silk feels, this is satin, and so when I see Aminah's piece, I just want to go touch her work and go. But anyway, so she also taught me pattern drafting, and I've been talking about 10 years old, and taking them apart and being an individual, and it's like, I want this sleeve and I want that. But when you're making, especially women's clothes, the body is a curve. And so if you're going across the breast or you're going across the bottom, it's a curve. And so in the human body, if you're making a clothing, it's okay to have a curve and it'll bulge over. But the challenge in my quilts is to get rid of the misnomer, first of all, of the fabrics that we use, and silks and the satins and the corduroys, and being able to dye that fabric the color that I wanted. So when my grandmother made my mother a dress, and she would use white linen, and she'd say, what color you want, and she would dye it. So African Americans dyed fabrics, and we did a good job at it. A lot of the fabrics that are down there, you cannot buy in that color that I dyed the fabric. I'm not answering your question, but that's the way.
Yes, you are.
Okay, but anyway, to get the curves, you have to make sure that when you make the curve that you go through and you clip it very close to the seams, and that opens it up. So if you clip the seams all the way around, eventually it lays flat. So, and Robert Storr is a very famous art historian, and I asked him, I said, what is it about my quilts that you like so much? And he said, it's that you can make them curved, and you go in and you make it lie flat, and you have the curve or the triangle end in the middle of the quilt. And then you have to pick it up and go on. Well, that's design. That's clothes making. And so it's risk. I don't believe in patterns, and neither did Aminah. All right, but for me it was to showcase the artistry of my grandmother, Annie Chambliss, and how Black seamstresses really could just work it, and that it's just what I do. That's how I do it.
That is well, it is quite something to see actually, because Avis will start and it'll just be a pile of fabric, maybe just a pile of strips of this colors and that colors and this and that and the other, and it starts coming together, and then she might cut it all in half and do this, that. No, but she'll cut it all and then put it back together in a slightly different way, and this thing emerges that is just an amazing, abstract composition, just in terms of the plane. But also, because it's in fabric, it's three-dimensional. It's you have the different textures of the different fabrics, and it all works together. It's really kind of an extraordinary process to watch.
I have to give credit to one person, and she's not here, and hopefully she's on Zoom, but it's Andrea Petway Williams. And I worked with the Freedom Quilting Bee in the 1970s. And that was a quilting bee in Wilcox County, Alabama. And when I was working full-time, I would make the quilt tops, and I'd send it down to Miss Weatherspoon in Alabama. And over time, they became very famous, the famous G-Spin quilters. But they taught me a lot about sharecroppers and color theory. And for all those quilters out there, you know that when you're selecting the fabric, you know your quilt color theories, and so this doesn't work and that doesn't work. So the idea, in talking to Mincy Petway and all these women that I've worked with since the 70s down in Alabama, was that we knew color theory. A lot of the G-Spin quilts that they made that you may see in a museum are not the original colors. So the greens turn to yellow, so the colors change because they washed them, so the colors are not the same. So we would work together to discuss the original colors of sharecroppers and slaves that we used. And so but the key for me was to come up with my own pattern and my own, what I found that was interested in slave quilts and in sharecropper quilts, and to make my own design to be as an individual. So
Well,
in
in fact, you were challenged by,
I was
a
challenged
mentor.
yeah.
Another woman who was one of those forces of nature said, no, you do your thing. You
Yeah,
find
exactly.
your thing.
Yeah.
But
note that the
did.
quilts are hand quilted, and she's hand quilting jeans and tapestry fabric. And I know we could go on and on, but it's not easy to take a little thin needle and quilt corduroy. Okay, so that's
Or heavy denim.
Or heavy denim.
Or heavy denim, which
yeah.
is done. Okay, listen.
That's it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I said that's it.
Okay, I would love to folks have a chance to ask a few questions, and so I think that's, because I know we're running a little later than we had planned, and I want to make sure we have a chance to get some questions from the audience. So Deidre, I think, is going to help us.
Yes, we're bringing a mic to the center here. And if anyone would like to ask a question, you're free to either shout it from your seat or go to the mic. Does anyone have a question?
Well, you're right next to the
You're
mic.
right next to the mic. So let's hear.
Thank you, ma'am.
I won't take it on. I saw an article about the two of you, and in it talked about that all of the years that you have been collecting you have now decided that probably your children won't necessarily really take care of your stuff or honor it, and so that you want to sell it.
No.
There was an article, and it had pieces in the New York Times maybe 2 weeks ago. And we have a collection, and we have 2 boys, and we're thinking, they're gonna look at this stuff and say, oh, you want that? Take it.
Okay.
So I just want,
All right. Well, you know, I am the collector, so, and the historian. So my goal in life is to tell African American history through artifacts, art, and quilts and fabrics. So that's my goal. My goal, I have slave collars. The most important pieces that I have are in storage, and that's where they will be. As economists, I wanted to spend time to look at the documents of slave traders and to find out what really was the economics of the slave trade. My sons, lawyers and scientists, I could trust them with my work, but to say that I'm going to sell all of my artifacts it's not true. Because in the end of the day, what I want is I want to display that work along with the artwork to tell the history of our history and culture of America and the diaspora. So that's really where I'm coming from.
And we're hoping that we'll have another chance to, in an exhibition a couple of years ago down in Florida, we were able to show just a few artifacts along with Avis's artworks, and the way they worked together was extremely powerful, and we're hoping to.
It was
there
funny.
Was an old cotton gin.
Yeah.
There was.
The waterfront
There
from
was
Biloxi,
a
Mississippi.
water cooler from Biloxi, Mississippi,
Yeah.
with lights on this side and color on this side, and there was a document that we've lent to exhibitions in the past that records the sale of a Negro girl in the year 1776, and we're hopeful that we can do that sort of exhibition again.
I apologize.
No, you don't have to apologize.
No.
Or maybe the New York Times should apologize.
We are all about family.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I was just overwhelmed and mesmerized. I came into the museum when Deidre Hamler was putting the work up, and I had gone to see, is it Forward Together?
Forward Together.
And so I said, one day I said, I'm just coming back over to get some more. And I walked in, and there was your work. And I was just stunned. So could you tell us a little bit more as to where your work is displayed? I read something about it, but can you tell us how pervasive your work is in all over the world?
Okay. I'm an introvert. And so my work, I have never displayed any of my work in a museum, ever. This is the first time that my work has ever been displayed. She just gasped because you didn't know that. You did not know that. I didn't mean to make you cry.
I know it was rare, but I didn't know we were the first.
No, never. It is a part of my soul. It is who I am. It is a part of my community. It is you. And I'm serious about this. It's, remember, extraordinary, ordinary people. My mom, my brother Eddie, who's deceased and died a year ago, is hanging in that gallery. And so I have not sold my work. It is a part of of a documentation of who we are. The Foundation for Arts and Preservation, Darren Walker, Joe Carroll Lauder, Bob Storr, Thelma Golden, they have placed my artwork in the U.S. Embassy in Russia, in the U.S. Embassy in London, in the U.S. UN building mission in New York. I made a collar for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So they sort of have been sort of mentoring me and pulling me out. But no, you can't see it anywhere.
The new U.S. ambassador to Angola asked to borrow during his term a second John Lewis portrait that Avis did. So there's a John Lewis portrait in the embassy in Rwanda now.
There's one quilt, I did donate one quilt to this called Sharecropper's Masterpiece in Smithsonian African American History and Culture Museum has that.
And there's also, I buried the lead. So if you go to Ford's Theater in Washington, where Lincoln was assassinated, the image of Lincoln, the only one that you see when you go in the theater in the lobby, is a painting that Avis did. So.
What about Sharon's piece?
Oh, yeah. Sharon Malone is a friend of ours, and her sister Vivian Malone integrated the University of Alabama. And so I painted Vivian Malone Fears No Evil, and that's a 16 feet by
painting.
Huge painting. And so that is owned by Sharon Malone.
And it's a painting of the moment with Vivian Malone walking into the University of Alabama, George Wallace standing at the schoolhouse door, Nicholas Katzenbach sent from Deputy Attorney General there to sort of enforce the law, a crowd in the background. It's a really,
and Sharon and Eric over in the corner.
Yeah, she put the faces of Sharon Malone and her husband Eric Holder just in the crowd,
But Vivian is walking over slave shackles and historical documents.
Images that are in
and
the ground.
in the schoolhouse door is lynched African people inside the door.
It's amazing. It's a pretty amazing piece,
it's amazing.
and that was shown once with the water cooler from Mississippi with whites and coloreds on the side right in front of it, and it was pretty spectacular. Yes.
First off, this vibe y'all giving off of each other, the love. I gotta say this.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that.
Sir, I see the love and the admiration that you have for your wife, and I want you to know it is so beautiful, just beautiful, beautiful. And to you, my sister, I feel you when you talk about your work, when you said you cry. It is when you know that you know. When you know that you know, you can't help but cry, and thank you.
Thank you.
I needed to hear that.
Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Good evening. As we know, it's never been easy to be Black in America. And so I'm wondering if you could tell us how you've created space for your creativity. When I think about, student loan debt and climate change and all of these things, it can be very overwhelming, but it seems that you've been able to sort of create space to dream. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Okay, you do know that I worked in climate change and was in the climate change negotiations, and so, yeah. It gets a little intense in our house. Let me put it that way. But that's a really good question. I really, as a child and even as an adult, I really am an introvert. This is just a show. But I'm also a cancer survivor, and I've seen death, and I know that life is short, and you don't have time not to have time. You got to go downstairs in that studio, and you got to document this, and you got to do what you got to do. There are so many barriers to keep me from doing or getting me through, getting me where I want to be. But you know what? Ain't nobody gonna get in my way. And so you just have to say, I went to school, Brown versus Board of Education, lived in a black neighborhood. We were the first blacks in Montgomery County, South Maryland. I integrated that school. They tested me to see if I could be still in that class, or they're gonna put me in special ed, and my IQ was so high, it was like, okay, we gotta keep her there. And I just made it, you just have to make it through. You have to just keep on keeping on. And so I go down, when he's writing, I leave him alone. And when I don't get in his space. And so I go down into the studio and I do my work, and he never comes down to see what I'm doing to break my groove, and I don't mess with his, I don't break his groove. So we had to sort of balance.
Not go to the studio when she's in a group. And you know how you could tell? You can tell if the studio is it's a big studio. It's right below the family room. When I hear the music pumping, I just like, she might be down there for a while.
No, but
I just want to toss in one thing. I think we both had incredible teachers and examples in our family, and so her mother, in a rural part of Montgomery County where they moved and where African Americans were living back in the woods in shacks. I mean, really substandard housing. And her mother got, convened, churches and nonprofits and did this incredible thing and got affordable, decent new housing built for those families.
But during the day, she was working at NIH doing cancer research.
But it was an amazing
So she's doing
thing
cancer
to do.
research at NIH, and then she's going home and and doing affordable housing.
And I remember,
So
my
that's what we do.
parents, working for civil rights in the 60s in South Carolina. I remember NAACP meetings in the living room, and I remember, the Orangeburg Massacre happened in my town with 3 black students were killed by state troopers, unarmed black students, I might add, during a demonstration. So the last generation set an example for us, and I think, I hope we can set an example for the next generation.
But your question is a really good question.
It is.
Because Gene goes off into his space, and when I first met him, it's like, when he's reading, it was like, you don't talk to me when you're reading, and so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go off and you don't talk to me. So and we just come and we have lunch or dinner or whatever, and then we do go off into this zone. It's a zone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you. Good question. I think probably the last question. Yeah.
Okay, well, first, thanks for coming to visit our city. We really appreciate it. It's
thank
a
you.
really great honor to
Thank
have
you for having us.
And I just want to pick up on your points about disinformation. I think you're very right about the things you said. And the one thing that I just have a continuous question about is there's so many things about it, right? I mean, it affects anti-science views. It's, there's just lies about, our leaders and about things. And, And so much of it is just, do you think at the core it's about like just profits, or is it, foreign interference, or is it, just a whole bunch of things? How does it become so overwhelming?
I think, number one, I don't know, but number two, I think it's about all of the above. I think it's, yes, I think there's some foreign interference. Yes, I think it's being used for, partisan political purposes. Yes, it's being used for, like, crazy political purposes, for people who aren't necessarily partisan Republicans or Democrats, but who are crazy. And it works on so many different levels. So the other day on the air, when it was announced that Dr. Fauci was retiring, I said something nice about Dr. Fauci. I referred to his work on the program, the PEPFAR program, that provided antiretroviral drugs to Southern Africa, which was approved by George W. Bush. This is not a partisan thing. It was approved by George W. Bush over the objection of his political advisors. It was far and away the best thing he did as president. I have questions about some of the other things he did, but it was a really good thing, and it literally saved millions of lives. And so I sort of mentioned, and Fauci was in the middle of that, of coordinating that. And so I mentioned that, and I mentioned COVID, and I mentioned all the lives he had saved. And so that set off some sort of troll alert on Twitter. And so all these people are writing in about, Fauci, and he's so awful, and and he actually killed people somehow. And half of these Twitter mentions I'm getting are not even from real people. If you click, you can see they're from bots. They're from, and so it'll say it's from, Dan Johnson, but you look at the actual name of the account and it's like, Dan 0965438 9, and you click through, and it's somebody who has 1 follower or 0 followers, and it's a bot. It's all automated. And so even on that level, yet that's, cluttering up my mentions. People do a search of they make sure to put my Twitter handle in there, and so somebody who wants to search that is going to come up with all this nonsense. And now, why is somebody doing that? It beats me. I don't understand.
Well,
that's what we need to find out.
Well, my real question then is what do you think we can do to kind of restore the truth, and with the broader purpose of restoring our democracy? I have the feeling that many Americans are tired of democracy, or they don't understand it. Mm-hmm. And I really think that we have to find ways to tell people about really the majesty and excellence of democracy, and how it really makes such a giant difference in the lives of everyday people, and that we have to learn to rediscover these values.
There's some basic things, and there are longer range term solutions. I think, yes, it would be great if we could teach, civics in school, in a smart way, and the way we used to have to take it, but the reason I talked about that, and the reason I ended by saying we need more research is I literally believe that. I literally believe we don't fully, and we understand some things about how disinformation works. I don't think we understand enough of it to know what, how we can effectively work against it, and work to tamp it down, and work to end it. I think, the policies that Twitter has and that Facebook have always seem to be way behind the disinformers, and so they'll knock a whole bunch of bots off, and then there's twice as many on the next day. We're going to have to work at this.
Do they really not know who they are?
Well, I don't know. I mean, one thing you could do, you could say to social media, you have the same liabilities as the Washington Post. So if we write anything in the paper, if we publish anything in the paper, including an op-ed by somebody who's not on staff, or including a letter to the editor or whatever, anything we publish, if it's false and defamatory about somebody in a libelous way, we have exposure and we can be sued. So we have to be very careful about every word we print in the paper. Now, you say that to Silicon Valley, and they have conniptions and they faint and they say, that's impossible, we can never do that, we get 10 billion posts a day or whatever, and we'd have to hire, 200,000, people. Well, you've got enough money to hire those 200,000 people, right? And you do. I mean, they do. And I know it would cut their profit margins, and it would be a real blow to the industry, and maybe on balance, we don't want to go that far, but what social media platforms are doing looks a lot like publishing to me. And so that is a way of letting, that's kind of a market-based approach to dealing with disinformation. And the reaction would be, there are a lot of people who would hate it. And I don't know if you could even get that through at this point. But that's one simple idea.
Well, thank you so much for tonight.
Thank you.
Welcome to Columbus.
Thank you.
And come back again soon, please.
I will. Thank you. Thank you.
On behalf of the Columbus Museum of Art, I, Deidre Hamler, for those of you who do not know who I am. What is my title? Okay. Yes, I am the director of the Aminah Robinson Legacy Project.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Let me get myself together. First and foremost, let me thank Avis and Eugene Robinson. For taking their time coming all the way from Arlington, Virginia. I called Avis, we were chatting one day, and she says, I just really appreciate this artist, Aminah Robinson. What can we do to help you fundraise for your project? She says, I'll get Gene to come and talk. Is that okay with Gene? They do have an amazing relationship. It's beautiful to watch. So I really want to say thank you to both of you for jump-starting this big effort of ours, this endowment fund and resource raising effort. I also want to thank some people in the room who you may not have seen or you may not know their names, but there are many, many staff people that brought all of this together to help us mount the wonderful exhibition, to have us be here in this room today. And I would just like for any staff members to stand up so we can say thank you, thank you, thank you. Or raise your hands. Raise your hands in the back. I see you. I want to particularly thank Carol Genshaft, who has really sort of has led me along this path, has taught me quite a bit. She's a scholar. She has ushered Aminah Robinson for the past 20 years here at the museum. And if Carol Genshaft is in the room, I know you are somewhere, would you please stand so we can do a public thank you, thank you, thank you for all of your work? And then on a solemn note, I want to say thank you to our inaugural Aminah Robinson Scholar in Residence, who is now passed, unfortunately. His name is Terrence Dean, and I know there are members of the faculty from Denison University here. Terrence worked with us from the beginning of January 2022. He was scheduled to be with us as a scholar for 2 years, and unfortunately, he just passed. So I want to say a thank you to him in memoriam, and hopefully he hears this to know that we are going to see through the work that he helped create, and we are going to see it through, Terrence. So hope you're listening, Terrence. Any final thanks? All right. Oh, let me also personally thank our hosts, Larry and Donna James, Joyce Beatty, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. Let's give her her props. Stand up, please. We wouldn't be here without you all. Thank you so much. The museum's open until 9. You can continue to party. All right.
Perfect. You are perfection. But I knew that. You know, I told them I've known you 20 years. I've known you 30 years, baby.
You have known me
30 years at least.
Since 19. I started